Christian Apriorism. The liberal world lauds diversity and decries division. The diversity lauded is merely physical variations. The division decried are akin to family squabbles. Diversity based on visible differences is a distraction and lacks measurable value. There are two groups that make up the world. This is the division that matters. There is no diversity other than the diversity of two inherently antagonistic groups. There is no path to their reconciliation. This is the only division that matters. These two groups compose two races. There are two races because there are two totally distinct people with two totally incompatible views of reality. Without the existence of these two races and their adherence to two irreconcilable positions, there is no war or crime and there would be no means of proving the Bible is true. There can be no biblical truth if there are no lies. The liars cannot be those who live in the truth. Without evil there is no good. Good is the antithesis of evil, but most people do not make the connection between good and evil in two distinct peoples and two polarized ways of life. Most of us in our thinking are more Buddhist than Christian. We know good and evil are polar opposites, in theory, but we assume these are philosophical concepts, not something real. Despite the way the Bible describes good and evil, we assume a different truth. In our minds, good and evil are at opposite ends of an infinitely long continuum. Meaning good and evil do not actually exist as real things in a real world, they are elements of all persons. Modern man does not think absolutes exist. Good and evil are absolutes and therefore otherworldly, or not real. No one is either good or evil. We are all in between these two extremes. Some of us are better than others worse, but we are all in the middle. No one is black or white, we are all composed of shades of gray. At least that is the modern view. One of the best ways to illustrate modern through is with the ancient idea of yin and yang. Even though we see things in terms of black and white, we believe there are not true opposites. In all of us, there is both good and evil. The worst person has positive traits and the best have their faults. This way of thinking has more to say about the observer than about God or his view of things. The Bible never talks in terms of shades of gray. Good and evil and the people of the flesh and those of the spirit are discussed as absolutes. There is no suggestion that, in every condemned soul, there is a bit of salvation, nor does the Bible indicate that those who are saved carry with them part of what condemned them. There is a line between good and evil and between those who are saved and those who are not. If we cannot see it, God knows where the line is and where it is drawn. Perhaps more importantly, God knows why it exists and why it is in the place that it is. Humans tend to think in relativistic terms. But relativity is only possible in the world of the flesh. Indeed, if we find ourselves thinking of morality and reason in relative terms, it is a sure sign we are living in the flesh, rather than the spirit. Our minds cannot function if reality was qualified in relative. Something has to be fixed. There has to be a truth to serve as an axiom. If we reject the idea that God exists, what have we to base our decisions on? This is why logic is so important. If we do not think logically, we can think anything, for we have lost all boundaries. Atheists and secularists will not admit it, but they also subscribe to an axiom, or absolute proposition. They assume as a foundational position that the world is physical and everything in it is constructed from matter. This is why they have such an issue with God. They may contend that they have no philosophy or foundational constructs, but they must, or they inhabit a contradictory and incomprehensible universe. They must believe all knowledge comes from our sense perceptions. There is not route for spontaneous or direct learning. Everything we know, says atheists, comes through our senses as electrical impulses. Technically, if one is an atheist, there ought not be anything worth fighting for. Not even life has meaning if life is the same substance as dead matter. One life would not be worth more than another, nor worth saving. But no one can live in a relativistic universe. We are forced to give things meaning, and with meaning comes value. Even the phenomenologists understood that life without God had no meaning and was absurd. Man had to give life meaning even in a meaningless universe, or be faced by the absurdity of existence. Even so, the meaning secularists give to life is itself absurd. Giving meaning to what is essentially without value or meaning is the height of absurdity. Secularists want power, and to experience this, they need to have property. The ownership of property gives people power over the lives of others. If you own all the property and this ownership is absolute, you have absolute power over all those in your territory. No matter how pacifist one thinks one is, one needs to possess at the minimum one's body and soul. One cannot even be a pacifist unless one protects at all costs the sanctity of the soul. Bodily autonomy is a weak kind of power if one lacks access to the necessities of life. But how do we gain power without claiming property, and how can we claim property without coming into conflict with others who are similarly seeking power through the ownership of property? The world, as it is, forces us into an uncomfortable trade-off. We learn to fight for what we have and want, or we do without. There appears to be no path to life that does not involve struggle. At some point we are forced to fight or at least resist if we value life at all. Even if it is a more passive-aggressive agrarian life and the fight is directed at the elements, we still must stand against fate. But would anyone farm if they had their crops seized as they came ready for reaping? Life is such that it forces us to confront evil. The point at which we do this varies, but we all have to confront evil at some point, and it is at this point and at this time we mature and become adults. However, the question then is, what prompts some of us to become adults that do evil and others to become adults that confront evil? How do we know which is which, and what is the event that precipitates the decision? At some point in our life, we are confronted by a moral quandary. As children, we do not understand morality. Children are ethical creatures who understand the law and the do's and don't of ethical codes. But following parental rules is not morality. The Old Testament law was written for ethical children. The New Testament was written to bring human beings to moral maturity. But Christianity stands alone on that score. All other cultures and religions are ethical. Only Christianity exists to develop us from ethical children into moral adults. Only Christianity develops us into beings with moral choice. Moral choice can only be had by adults. That is because of the nature of morality, but even more importantly, moral choice is possible only for those who are not engaged in evil. Which brings us to the question as to what evil is. God did not come to destroy or denounce humanity. Jesus came to restore humanity to its original state. This nature is expounded in the teachings about the church. The church is humanity and humans are the church. To be human is to be a member of the church. The church is the door into the human race. Humans have spirit. To be reborn into the spirit, we need to enter through the church. Apriorism Christianity is about restoring faith. Man is not defined by science or facts. We do not get our views from politics or the mob. Truth is not determined by the popular vote. What liberalism cannot comprehend or deal with is that humans take their identity from the church. The church is defined by time and place. We are like Adam, the gardeners of a place within a time. Time and location give structure to the church to create organization. We own our jurisdiction in which we are located because this is the source of our identity. The church is a way to link and develop human societies without erasing our individuality within the one world government envisioned by liberals.